Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening. It's Friday, October 29th. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. We begin tonight with a taxing situation and proof once again there's no such thing as a free ride. On one hand, the need to expand public transit, the other, placing a tax for every mile you drive your car. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen explains.
The county's transportation agency, SANDAG, is 6 weeks away from voting on its next regional transportation plan, with a state mandate to slash greenhouse gas emissions. The roadmap takes a carrot and stick approach, make driving more expensive while expanding public transit and making it free. San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria says he's all for it.
Big changes are understandably difficult, and they certainly will have opponents. But I, for one, am committed to this vision. It is necessary for the protection of our economy, our environment, and our climate.
Conservatives on the SANDAG board of directors are mostly opposed to the plan, in part because it abandons certain freeway widening projects due to their environmental impacts. San Marcos Mayor Rebecca Jones says most of the transit improvements are in the city of San Diego.
North County is being left out and East County is being left out, and it just really is unfair, and it's not equitable.
The per-mile driving fee wouldn't happen until 2030, and it depends on changes to state and federal law. In the meantime, a coalition of unions and environmental groups is now working on a citizens initiative that would fund some of the transit projects. They're hoping to place it on the November 2022 ballot. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
In about 48 hours, streets across the county will fill with ghosts, goblins, and some superheroes as well. Halloween 2021 will be different from last year when we were in the thick of the pandemic and vaccines were not available yet. Still, as KPBS reporter John Carroll tells us, there are common sense precautions everyone should take.
It's a question likely on the minds of thousands of parents right about now. How to keep everyone safe on Halloween.
There's some risk that as these kids come to your door, some of them may actually have COVID and they won't know it and you won't know it and their parents might not even know it.
Sounds daunting, but Dr. John Bradley, who's the medical director of infectious diseases at Rady Children's Hospital, says taking some common sense precautions will keep things safe for everyone. First, if you or your children aren't feeling well, no trick-or-treating or handing out candy. But for the younger set that will be out collecting candy, Dr. Bradley says plastic masks do not take the place of the other kind we're all so familiar with now.
The aerosols that you generate when you have COVID will just go all around the mask and through the little holes that the kids breathe through.
Bradley says groups of children are fine as long as they keep 3 feet apart from one another. As far as distributing the sought-after sweets, Bradley says candy should all be individually wrapped or put into separate baggies. Last year, an Oceanside woman came up with an ingenious idea. She made these 6-foot-long tubes and slid the candy down to the trick-or-treaters. But tubes? That was so last year. If you're the one giving out the candy this year, you might want to try what Dr. Bradley is going to do. It involves, of all things, a cupcake cookie sheet.
You just put a few of those little pieces of candy in each of the tray, and then you present the tray to these kids and say, please pick one of these cupcake holder treats.
After the tray is empty, it's time to break out the sanitizing wipes.
Kids come, they pick up their stuff, leave, and you just wipe it down.
When the kids get home with their candy, Dr. Bradley says they should wash their hands frequently while eating it, and if you're handing out candy, you should do the same. Simple rules to follow to keep everyone safe on this
All Hallows Eve.
Happy Halloween. Crackle is my favorite. John Carroll, KPBS News.
And within a week, 28 million children may be eligible for a COVID-19 vaccine. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration granted emergency use authorization for Pfizer's vaccine for children aged 5 to 11. And that means Pfizer can start shipping millions of child-sized doses to doctors' offices, pharmacies, and other sites across the nation. Dr. Anthony Fauci is stressing the importance of the vaccine for kids.
I do feel it's important to vaccinate children. All you need to do is go to the pediatric hospitals around the country. More kids are getting infected. And as more kids get infected, some of them, maybe a small proportion, are going to have a serious outcome.
The CDC has to greenlight the child version before kids can start getting the shots. The agency's advisory panel is scheduled to meet Tuesday to address that. Community advocates and faith leaders are hosting vigils across California for lives lost in detention centers. KPBS reporter Melissa May has more on the vigil here in San Diego.
Let them know that we're here and we remember them.
Dia de los Muertos is Monday, November 1st. Ahead of the holiday, community groups are hosting vigils to remember those who passed while in an immigration and customs enforcement detention facility.
We want to use the opportunity to bring awareness to the community and remind them that sadly, COVID-19 had horrific consequences at these facilities.
Adriana Hasso is the program coordinator for the American Friends Service Committee in San Diego. Her group held its own vigil at the Otay Mesa Detention Center on Thursday. A detainee at Otay Mesa was the first to die of COVID-19 in an immigration detention center. That was in May of 2020.
To honor Carlos's life.
Hasso says the vigils are meant to provide healing for everyone.
If they want to remember someone who passed in their family, we know that COVID 2020 and 2021 has devastated some local families in overall or county. So we're also opening it up to the community.
A virtual vigil is also planned and will include family members who lost a loved one while in custody.
The vigil that will be happening on November 1st, on Monday, is an opportunity for people from other places, from other communities, to come and learn about what the impact that it has had on some of the families that have lost a loved one.
We reached out to CoreCivic, the company that runs the Otay Mesa Detention Center. They sent us a statement saying, "Our heartfelt sympathy goes out to anyone who's lost a loved one. The health and safety of the people entrusted in our care and our dedicated staff is our top priority." The vigils come a week after 24 members of Congress, all from California, sent a letter to the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, urging the closure of 3 detention facilities in the state. Melissa May, KPBS News.
The Biden administration is considering compensation for families who were separated at the border. The Wall Street Journal reports the payments could be as high as $450,000. About 5,500 children were separated from their parents under former President Trump's zero-tolerance policy for illegal border crossings. While many families have been reunited, immigration lawyers say it will still take some time for others.
Relatives or parents who have been deported to Central American countries, to name a few, and how do you locate them, some in rural areas. It is going to be an arduous process.
The Associated Press reports discussions on the amount of compensation for families are still ongoing, and an agreement is not guaranteed. The Justice Department is not commenting on those negotiations. President Biden is wrapping up his first day of a 5-day diplomatic mission across Europe. As Chris Nguyen reports, Biden is working to convince allies that the U.S. is ready to lead on the world stage on climate change and global economy and the pandemic response.
With diplomacy at the forefront, President Biden kicking off his second major overseas trip as commander-in-chief with a visit to Rome, meeting with Pope Francis for nearly an hour and a half.
You are the most significant warrior for peace I've ever met.
Biden, the second Catholic U.S. president, gifting the pontiff with a special military coin bearing the insignia of the Delaware National Guard unit in which his late son Beau served as a captain. The president and the Pope discussing their shared values on issues like climate change, COVID-19, and refugees.
He has a fundamental worldview that America cannot and should not go it alone, and that we work closely with our allies on issues like counterterrorism and issues of trade and economics, issues of vaccinating the world.
President Biden also meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron, their first in-person meeting since tensions arose last month after the U.S. and the U.K. agreed to help Australia acquire nuclear-powered submarines, sinking a multi-billion-dollar deal involving France. Biden's trip for the G20 summit in Italy and the United Nations Climate Change Conference in Scotland come as congressional lawmakers continue to work on the president's domestic agenda.
To show the rest of the world that we can function. That's extremely important, not just for our economy, but for our national security and our relationship with the rest of the world.
Chris Wynn, KPBS News.
California Governor Gavin Newsom was set to travel to the UN climate conference, but suddenly canceled today. His office cited family obligations as the reason, but a spokeswoman said the governor will participate virtually. Newsom plans to highlight his administration's policies, including a proposed ban on the sale of new gas-powered cars in the state by 2035. San Diego researchers are traveling to and watching Scotland online next week as scientists and the world leaders gather there to talk climate. Wildfires, drought, and damaging storms are heightened the sense of urgency to ramp up efforts to slow climate change. KPBS environment reporter Eric Anderson tells us what the study of ocean life and other local research will bring to the climate change debate.
UC San Diego master's student Gabriella Berman holds up a jar.
This is a piece of bone, so they grow in it, and I study the animals. So sometimes I have to take it.
That's an animal, not a plant.
Yeah, these are animals. Okay. A bunch of animals. Each string is an animal.
Yes, animals. Those noodle-shaped fronds are worms. And they're unique because they live on bones in the deep ocean. Bones like this chunk of whale vertebrate in a saltwater tank in the Rouse lab.
It's kind of old now. I think it's from 2019, but it used to have Osedax. Osedax is the name of the organism that I study, growing out of it.
Osedax rely on roots to draw nutrition from bones that settle on the sea floor.
They colonize the bone. It's both their home and a source of food.
A whale backbone, like this one, photographed off the California coast recently, provides a boost of nutrition in a place where food can be scarce. Berman's deep ocean samples live in the fridge in the lab until she can photograph, process, and sample the animal's genetic blueprint. She's helping establish a baseline for the species.
A lot of what we're looking at now is completely new information about where they are and how they're distributed in the ocean.
But Berman worries the push to mine the ocean floor for scarce resources puts the species in harm's way. And she's concerned about an ocean that is changing as the climate warms. That's one reason why she plans to go to the climate conference in Glasgow, Scotland.
That conference and the deliberations of all of the nations that are part of it really rely on science in order to inform the way that they approach the problem of climate change.
Margaret Leinen is the director of the Scripps Institution of Oceanography. She says the ocean is finally an important part of the climate discussion. 93%
of the heat that's been generated from greenhouse gases is in the ocean. 93%. So it has really protected us from far greater impacts on land.
A recent UN climate report concludes the world isn't moving fast enough to change in the face of climate change. The UN Secretary General says time is running out to meet the Paris Climate Accord greenhouse gas reduction targets, and the UN chief, Antonio Guterres, says there is a leadership gap. But Leinen remains optimistic that the scientists and world leaders will make progress at COP26, the Conference of Parties gathering in Scotland.
The role of advocacy is to say, do this as rapidly as we can. And the role of sort of the pragmatic negotiators is to say, this is how fast we can do it without, without killing our economy. And somewhere in between is what actually gets put on the table at COP.
If we're going to save the world, we're going to do it with batteries.
Michael Ferry is the director of energy storage and systems at UC San Diego. He says batteries are uniquely positioned to help decarbonize two of the economy's largest and most important sectors.
The first is the power sector, which is electricity production and supply, and transportation, which is, of course, how we move ourselves, how we move our goods, our food, and all of the other necessities of our modern world.
Ferry says electric cars and utility-scale battery storage is getting better and more efficient. He says advances in the past 5 years prove the technology is already mature enough to have a positive impact. California hit a milestone this past June when, for about 10 minutes, 4% of the state's electricity was supplied by batteries. Ferry will be in Glasgow next week to huddle with other scientists. He says he looks forward to seeing the United States reestablish itself as a leader in addressing climate change.
I think it's incredibly important. And I think we have to be, again, optimistic. We have to be bold. And we've been doing that in California for the last 15 years when it comes to climate change. And we have results to share with the world.
Ferry says if it can be done in California, it can be done elsewhere. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
Beachgoers and surfers are now being allowed back in the water after that oil spill a month ago off the Southern California coast. Areas like Huntington Beach and Newport Beach were hit hard by the spill, forcing the closure. Fishing, though, is still off limits in an area that ranges about 6 to 12 miles off Orange County due to the undersea pipeline that leaked at least 25,000 gallons of crude. Studies are still being done to determine the safety of shellfish and fish. And a first look now from the air at the damage done from the massive Dixie Fire in Northern California. It's the second largest fire in state history, burning more than 963,000 acres. Experts will now examine the scorched earth to determine effects from the recent atmospheric river storm in the hopes to prevent flooding and rock slides.
Onshore flow returning for us as we head throughout the weekend. So that means we're going to deal with a few more clouds out there, but overall the story is staying dry. No big storm systems on the horizon. For us around the region tonight, we come down to the upper 50s for lows in San Diego, working our way through the interior here. Some places like Ramona hitting 47. Getting into Saturday, tomorrow, looking quiet around most of the region. You can see where there is going to be some unsettled weather off towards the north, trying to bring in some cool air to the northern tier of the nation, but it's nowhere near our region. So that's why we're staying dry. Again, that onshore flow giving us a few extra clouds, a partly sunny day, 71 for the high. Chula Vista also 71. As you head towards Mountain Laguna, we're in the mid 60s, Borrego Springs lower 90s. Sunday's forecast still dry, still pleasant. Notice though, there's another storm system offshore of Northern California. That's going to make an entrance going into Monday, where they will see some rain in the northern part of our state. But for us, we miss out on that action, so we will stay dry. The next couple of days, though, the trend is to get a little bit cooler here. Notice we're shaving off temperatures back into the 60s. Some of that has to do with the onshore flow, the extra clouds around, which is why we do have low clouds breaking into sunshine for Halloween itself. And inland communities, more of the same here. In fact, we might even dip down to the upper 60s for highs on Monday. So noting that cooler trend in a few spots. Mountain locations, we make it back to the 50s here. Mid 50s on Monday, mostly cloudy, kind of a cool pattern. But overall, no rain chances for us. So we are staying dry, and that's going to be true pretty much wherever you are, including the desert locations, which do dip back into the mid 80s after spending Saturday in the 90s, so a little bit warmer. But as we bring in some more of those clouds, we'll find those temperatures easing off a bit right through Halloween and beyond.
San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria is ordering a review of all planned road widenings in the city. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen says some of those projects could end up on the chopping block.
Last month, KPBS reported on plans to widen a block of El Cajon Boulevard and how those plans conflict with the city's larger goals of reducing car travel to fight climate change. Construction on the project began last week after city officials decided it was too late to stop. But Gloria ordered the review of similar widening projects across the city to prevent them from reaching the same point of no return.
What we've identified are a number of legacy projects that are working their way through the system that may envision stuff that made sense in the 1980s, 1990s, or 2000s, but no longer makes sense in the 2020s when we understand we have an urgent climate crisis.
El Cajon Boulevard is one of San Diego's deadliest streets, with 11 traffic deaths and more than 1,000 serious injuries since 2015. The Business Improvement Association here says adding another lane for cars, even for just one block, will make it even more dangerous, especially for pedestrians and cyclists. Gloria says the city's Vision Zero campaign to end all traffic deaths in the next 4 years requires a new approach to designing streets.
And what we have to do, and our Vision Zero goals demand this of us, that we create transportation infrastructure that works for everybody. Often when widening roads, what you're doing is advantaging one class of commuter at the cost of other kinds of commuters, walkers and bikers, transit riders.
Considering San Diego is a sprawling city with nearly 3,000 miles of streets, the review of road widening projects is a massive undertaking, likely to last many months. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
San Diego County's largest solar farm is moving toward construction in Jacumba Hot Springs, but neighbors want more out of the developer and the county. iNews Source reporter Camille Von Canel explains.
The 600-acre solar farm would be a little over a football field away from homes at the edge of Jacumba. It lies closer to a residential community than any solar farm of similar size in San Diego or Imperial counties. Diana Sherwood lives in one of the homes closest to the project at the Wagon Wheel Mobile Home Park. She wants the developer to do more to protect her health from the heat and dust she fears from the solar panels.
I don't know how bad it's going to get, but I might have to move because of it. And I haven't found another place as quiet as Jacumba.
The pushback on the solar farm showed local climate advocate Matthew Vasilakis that San Diego County officials need to do more to smooth talks between rural communities and the developers of big renewable energy projects.
I think that they can look into developing some best practices and some policies to at least try and get some alignment on how to go about these activities.
County officials are now working with a local group to allocate $4 million the developer has agreed to provide to the community as a condition of getting its permit. For KPBS, I'm iNews Source reporter Camille Von Canel.
iNews Source is an independently funded nonprofit partner of KPBS. The Padres reportedly have a new manager. He is Bob Melvin, a three-time manager of the year who has spent the past 11 seasons with the Oakland A's. Before that, he was with Seattle and Arizona. The 60-year-old Melvin will replace Jace Tingler, who was fired at the end of a disappointing season. The Padres are expected to officially announce Melvin on Monday. And the San Diego State Aztecs are looking to keep their undefeated season going as they host Fresno State tomorrow night. The Aztecs are top of the Mountain West Conference with 7-0 record. It's SDSU's best in the 46 years since the program began, and the team has high hopes for a top bowl game as well.
I'm Amna Nawaz. Tonight on the NewsHour, Biden abroad. The president heads overseas as the fate of his domestic agenda remains uncertain. That's coming up at 7 right after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Something rotten smelling is happening soon at the San Diego Botanic Garden in Encinitas. As KPBS's Alexander Nguyen shows us, it's not from something nefarious, but instead it's a giant flower.
They smell awful.
And the San Diego Botanic Garden president and CEO Ari Novi couldn't be more excited about it. The smell, in this case, is coming from the diva of the flowering world, the Titanarum, or corpse flower as it is better known. This is the second time this plant, lovingly called Jack Smellington, bloomed here. The last time it flowered was in 2018. Just how bad is the smell? Well, Novi paints quite a picture.
Is that it smells a lot like you saved up your dirty laundry clothes for a couple of weeks, you put them in a garbage bag, you also threw in some dead fish and some rotting hamburgers, and then you put that all by the side of the road somewhere really warm like Borrego on a 110-degree day for 12 hours.
The plant is native to Sumatra, an Indonesian island south of the Malaysian peninsula. And it's endangered. The Botanic Garden is part of the network of gardens around the world working to save this species. Once this flower blooms, it will be hand-pollinated using pollen from 2 flowers that bloomed in July at the Huntington Library. But this flower is taking its time to bloom. And once the sheath known as the bracts falls off, the flower is ready to bloom, and the garden thinks it could happen any day now. And once it blooms, you have 48 hours to enjoy all of its stinking glory. Already the plant has attracted attention from people all over, like 8-year-old Nambe Azevedo Sanchez. He is visiting from Oxnard with his family.
Well, I think it's like cool to see like a plant that big besides the trees, but that's a cool plant.
His father, Antonio Sanchez, who's had the pleasure of seeing and smelling the plant once before at the Huntington, but he is still in awe of the plant, which can grow as much as 6 inches in a day.
So this plant is amazing when it flowers. And the cool part is that it's stinky. We can't smell it right now, probably a few days away.
Once the plant blooms, the garden is expected to open with extended hours so everyone can come to take a whiff. And if you miss it, don't worry. A sister plant is expected to bloom a few weeks later. Alexander Nguyen, KPBS News.
Well, that sounds amazing. You can monitor the flower's progress online. The Botanic Garden has set up a 24-hour live streaming camera, and the link is available on our website, kpbs.org. Too bad you can't smell it for yourself. And you can find the rest of tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley. And by the following: and by viewers like you. Thank you.